Good evening. My name is Priya Jaydev. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Clown County, a nonpartisan, issues-focused organization. I am the moderator for tonight's candidate forum focusing on Legislative District 24, Position 2. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Clown County and the North Olympic Library System. It is being recorded and will be posted on the Clown County League website in a few days. Thank you to the many volunteers who make tonight's forum possible. Voting is a primary focus of the League, ensuring voters know how to register, how to track their ballots, what the issues are, and providing unbiased candidate information is key to serving our mission, along with election observing. We appreciate you listening and taking an interest in being an informed voter. State legislators shape daily public life and establish public policy for Washington State. They draft, debate, and vote on laws impacting areas such as public safety, education, health, transportation, and business regulations. They decide how state tax revenue is collected and spent, ensure state agencies properly implement laws, act as a check and balance to other branches of government, and assist their constituents in resolving issues with government services. Most importantly, they are the collective voice of their constituents, balancing many points of view. In this year's Legislative District 24 Position 2 race, there are 5 candidates: Bradley Nemo Callaway, Patrick DePoe, Mark Hodgson, Marcia Kelbon, and Kaylee Kuehn. Thank you all for participating in this evening's discussion. Over the past few weeks, we received more than 60 questions from community members. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. We combined similar questions so we could cover as many topics as possible in the time we have. We hope tonight's discussion helps voters better understand the candidates and their priorities. For their opening statement, we have asked each candidate to tell us why they are running for the legislator position, what experience prepares them for serving, and what their top 3 priorities are. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to this, and we will follow ballot order. Starting with candidate Callaway, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, friends. My name is Bradley Nemo Callaway. I'm running for LD24 Position 2. I am a grassroots organizer. I work as a member of the Port Angeles Indivisible Leadership Team. I work as a member of the Executive Committee on North Olympic Democratic Socialists of America. I participate in our local ICE rapid response groups. I do mutual aid work. I put my back into the work that makes our society run. And at every stage, I feel the same thing. People working together can do so much and accomplish so much. But the Epstein class and the corporate executives continue to take more than they could ever need, while people on the ground starve and die of preventable illness and huddle in tents and break their backs to make their ends meet. The corporate elite provide nothing while taking everything, leeching our power, our wealth, and our labor until there's nothing left. And the leadership that is currently in power in our state is content to let that continue. Together we are strong, and together we can make a better world possible. A world where people aren't just cogs in some corporate machine, but are dignified participants in a society that works for everyone. We fight for thriving working class communities, universal health care with no premiums or copays or deductibles, and into the war on drugs, into the mass incarcerations of our corporatized prison system, focusing instead these criminal justice systems on treatment and rehabilitation instead of labor extraction. Universal education and housing that ensures every resident has the opportunity to not just live, but to thrive. Supporting our working families with paid leave and universal child care. We fight for the working class. We fight to ensure that everyone has a voice in their workplace, a voice in their society, and the ability to live a successful life. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
Hello, my name is Patrick DePoe. I've been a union member, been a fisherman. I've been a 20-year first responder. I've been a healthcare worker. This district is part of who I am, culturally, spiritually. I grew up here. This district raised me. I'm running for this position because I believe our rural communities need a fighter, a strong voice that's able to elevate our issues and really speak to the unique differences that we deal with when it comes to education, healthcare, natural resources. which are highlighted in my priorities. My experience comes with working directly with this legislature on bills, amendments, testimony for over a decade. That can be seen from endorsements coming from tribal leadership, coming from legislators, coming from unions. I really just humbly ask that, with your support and your vote, that I can be that strong voice for us in Olympia, that I continue serving our district. And I just want to say thank you for the time. And thank you for the opportunity to show up tonight.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
Good evening, everyone. And just first of all, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for hosting. My name is Kaylee Kuehn, and I'm running to be your next state representative for position 2 in the 24th LD. So I grew up in Sequim as the daughter of 2 public school teachers, and this community has shaped who I am. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher and a coach. I've worked in our state legislature, helping constituents connect to services and to move legislation. I have actually advocated in Olympia for union workers, and now I'm raising my daughter here on the Olympic Peninsula. Every one of those experiences has reinforced the same lesson, that our government should work for the people it's meant to serve. I'm running because too many people in our district are working hard and still struggling to get ahead. Working families can't afford to buy a home here, including myself. Seniors are stretching fixed incomes further and further every single year. Employers can't find workers because people can't find housing. Access to health care is far too limited, and too many rural communities continue to be left behind. If elected, my top 3 priorities will be making our communities more affordable by increasing affordable and middle housing supply, improving access to health care services throughout our district, and by strengthening education and workforce opportunities so that people can build a good life here right at home. I believe that good representation starts with listening, showing up, and actually doing the work. I won't be a representative who disappears between elections. I will be accessible, I'll work hard for you, and I will bring the experience and determination and motivation to deliver practical solutions for all of us here in the 24th Legislative District. Thank you, and I look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
Good evening. Thank you to League of Women Voters for putting this on. League of Women Voters always does the best job. And if you need any information on how government works, you go to League of Women Voters. My name is Mark Hodgson, and I'm running for the State House here in the 24th Legislative District. I'm a father of 2, a girl dad, a grandfather, a Navy combat veteran, a 20-year law enforcement officer. And this campaign is about prioritizing rural voices in Olympia. As your next representative, I will lean on my personal and professional experience to advocate for solutions to the issues our district faces. Those struggles aren't abstract to me. They're real, and the same ones I faced growing up as a young adult and returning from military service. From affordable housing to living wage jobs and public safety, I've been there and will work to put our district at the center of policy and funding decisions that improve our district's standard of living. I grew up in apartments, complexes, duplexes, triplexes, lived with family, in a trailer, all of those things before my parents finally qualified for a first-time homeowner's low-income home loan. And it was only through that they were finally to be able to get into homeownership. And as kids, the housing stability for us was huge. We didn't have to worry about moving anymore, changing schools. We could hang posters on the wall. My parents could paint a wall something other than white, and they could finally invest in themselves and their own home equity to build that generational wealth and that cornerstone of the American dream. When I started my family, I worked 3 jobs just to pay the bills. I worked in fast food, retail, temporary jobs, all to patch together enough money to pay rent, utilities, and the groceries. And we measured success on a month-to-month basis. We hoped that we could just set our bills down back to 0 and start again the next month. And so many families are doing that today. It needs to stop. We need to prioritize our working class families, build out our working class, and make housing affordable and living wage jobs for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kelbon.
Hi, I'm Marcia Kelbon. I live in Quilcene, roughly equidistant between Forks and Aberdeen. and I've been focusing on that entire region. I've lived on the Olympic Peninsulas for 45 years. I've raised my children here, and my adult children and grandchildren live here. So I'm vested in the future of the peninsula. I have a background in engineering, law, and business. As a patent attorney, I helped many individuals start up their businesses and protect their innovations. And as general counsel and number two executive in a biotech, I helped guide that from startup to over 250 jobs when I left it 20 years later. I bring to those set of skills to the legislature, and I see a need to focus on business growth and working living wage jobs, which we're in dire need of on the peninsula. That helps raise the standard of living for the individuals, lets them raise families here, and it helps them be able to have a chance to afford homes. But that's half the equation. The other half is the regulatory situation that makes homes so difficult. So by more living wage jobs, better access to homes, and then better able to support our local education, which turns us to the state budget. Right now, we have a budget that has been spent not necessarily always wisely. We need to prioritize education, infrastructure, public health, and safety, make sure that money is being spent effectively, and that we are having accountability on that. So I'd like to go back and have us refocus at the state level, make sure we're fully funding education, including having buildings that are seismically sound, which we don't have for our children right now, and make sure that we can all have a prosperous future here for the next couple of generations. That's why I run. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for your attention, and thank you to the League for hosting this forum.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move on to the questions section. Unless I say otherwise, each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question. The first set of questions focus on infrastructure and growth. So, what specific industries should Washington invest in to create jobs in Legislative District 24, and why? Candidate DePoe, you have 90 seconds.
It's a continuation of work that's been started, in my opinion. If you go down to Aberdeen, there was a levee project that Theringer started to work on that results in folks actually being able to lower their cost of flood insurance on a year to year, helps developers be able to permit and site more housing to be able to get those to fruition. Another project in that area is US 12 that also makes that area more accessible. And once again, it's some of these areas are driven by tourism. So being able to get those folks out there in a reasonable manner that they can leave and they can enjoy the time on the beaches. And then we go over here to Port Hadlock, looking at another sewage project that allows folks to continue to build infrastructure in that area, not just businesses, but also houses and homes. And so I would look at, more construction for infrastructure use for building these new projects, more capital budget requests to keep going along this line to see these projects through. And then there's also expansions that we're looking at, mental health clinics over in Sequim, for example. There's an expansion that's currently underway that also might need some more support. And then there's the siting and the permitting. There's no reason construction projects should be held up to 2 years, 18 months just to get done, start moving forward. Energy and environment, some of these infrastructure, some of these transportation, I think are really big priorities that need to be addressed on day one. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn?
Will you please repeat the question? I want to make sure I got it right.
Absolutely. What specific industries should Washington invest in to create jobs in Legislative District 24, and why?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the question. So when I think about industries that Washington should invest in, I think about green energy. I think that green energy is a fantastic way that we can move forward and create living wage, family wage jobs going forward. Sorry. So, we have a history here in the 24th Legislative District of timber, right? And I'm happy to say I'm not taking any timber industry money because, I don't want to give the impression at all that I am bought out or have special interests in mind. My sole focus is on the working people of this district and making sure that we have them at the forefront of our mind here. And so I want to make sure that we're not only relying on tourism, but looking at maybe new ideas and new ways about how we can help grow, not only new ways opportunities like in green energy and clean energy jobs, but also in, our small businesses here. And, we have boat building, marine trades like in at our ports that we could continue to expand upon and invest in that will get people more opportunities. I think that also means looking at career and technical education and how we can expand apprenticeships for students and kids to, be able to get those types of jobs and stay here. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
Yeah, we should invest in family jobs that align with our environmental values and that leverage our unique environment, like our deep water ports, to build out our maritime industry. It's a good question because, like I said in my opening statement, these are a lot of the same things that we're facing that I was facing, as a kid just out of high school. And when my son, he got out of the military and he lived with me for about a year because, guess what? Housing's really expensive. He also struggled to find a family wage job for his young family and ended up living with me for a year so he could get his feet on the ground. Not everybody has that kind of luxury. A lot of us have to struggle and just work to make ends meet. And so what we need is a robust economy out here that is built on sustainable forestry, that pushes the edge in technology, like some of our composite companies in Port Angeles, but also, as I said before, uses our ports to increase maritime traffic and shipbuilding and repairs. But look, I think the bottom line is, we're a green state and this is a green district. And I think that we should be leading the edge and we should be the leading edge in renewable energy equipment, renewable energy production. And I think that we can do that. And particularly with the unique relationship that we have with Peninsula College. We've already seen that unique relationship grow benefits in our nursing community.
Thank you. Candidate Kelbon.
Thank you. Really good question. I may be an outlier here, but we're still really good at growing trees, and I'm excited by some of the newer projects I see coming out, including the pellet plant down in Holcomb, the cross-laminated panels that are in Port Angeles and the Makah tribe, the Jefferson Timber Cooperative, which is locally sourced wood that is locally milled to order. Those are all great things we should continue after. We do still have a good timber economy and need to keep that going. I've also very much want to support light manufacturing, and this goes from the metal boat building that happens in Port Townsend with ACI, and then in Port Angeles as well, to Atlas manufacturing in Port Townsend, kind of a vacuum technology. We should support all of that, and as well as those things, I want to make sure we have infrastructure to keep that going. And that goes everything from education, making sure we adequately fund our community colleges so we can have skilled tradespeople that are required for these jobs, keeping our major highway conduits open, including 101 without so many roundabouts, making sure we can utilize our ports and railroads down in Grays Harbor. That infrastructure all needs to be paid attention to make sure it's still working so we have a welcoming environment for business. And also that's adopting state policies that don't punish businesses and chase them to other states. Make sure they're embraced and encouraged to stay and build here. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway.
Your local area is uniquely suited to jobs in ecological management and research. We can use our excellent parks and our excellent forests in a lot of different ways. We can continue our current sustainable timber infrastructure. We can ensure that people are able to work in the forests where they like. But we can also ensure that we are researching utilizing forests as carbon capture. We can research what is happening with the populations in the woods. We can play around with what happens in the various environments as we change things or mess with how we're doing the ecology. And all of this is an excellent option to grow living wage science support jobs. And it is also an excellent time to bring together all of this ecological research and all of this ecological sustainability action to not just enact carbon capturing operations, but make sure that we as a community can put out a negative carbon output and sell that excess carbon on a future cap and trade market. We can also use our beautiful natural areas to help with mental health recovery for people that need somewhere beautiful to recover from mental health issues. We can use our local deep water ports to grow our fisheries and our trade. We can build out infrastructure to bring rail to Port Angeles, to Forks, to help ease these infrastructural constraints. And we can help grow services that help our retiree populations. Thank you.
Thank you. I failed to say in my introduction that tonight's forum is being broadcast on KPTZ, and thank you to them as a partner in the evening's forum. With that, I'm going to move on to the second question, which is also a 90-second question. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing rural hospitals, and what, if anything, should the state do to address them? Candidate Kuehn, you have 90 seconds.
Okay. So I have had the opportunity to meet with Grays Harbor Hospital and kind of hear directly from them about some of the challenges that they are facing. And unfortunately, it sounds like it's very similar for OMC, that primary care services and OB services, they lose money on those services because of just the high rates of Medicaid and Medicare with the populations out here, and the lack of a local economy that has thriving private payers. And so I think one of the things that we should do is at the legislature is to fight for higher reimbursement rates. That's what I would start by doing, is making sure that we can have higher reimbursement rates for Medicaid and Medicare. And that way we can continue to ensure that people can access the services that they need. So when hospitals are struggling financially, people end up worrying about what they're going to receive for service, the quality of care that they will get. And access is a really big issue out here. I've been in the car driving an hour plus away to take my Nana to a different type of, different hospital to ensure she could access care. I've had to drive over an hour away and tried to navigate the unreliable ferry system to make sure I could get services and care that I needed. And so that's the number one thing I would do.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
Thank you. Would you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing rural hospitals, and what, if anything, should the state do to address them?
Yeah, rural hospitals just like with COVID, anything that affects a rural area, a rural district it affects us 10 times more than anything along the I-5 corridor. So our hospitals are even more important in our area than they are in a more densely populated area, and that has to do with, in our area in particular, older population and distance in between hospitals and services. So I think that first and foremost, what we need to do as legislators is work with our congressional counterparts to lobby for higher reimbursement rates for Medicare and Medicaid. Secondly, I think that the state has a responsibility to backfill in some type of way the loss of those reimbursements so that we can keep rural hospitals open. Look up here on the peninsula, and the rural hospital environment here is not just about the community's health and safety and well-being. Absolutely it is. But it's also a major employer here and an economic driver. And we want to bring families out here to our good schools, our good hospitals, and our houses. And without this critical link being sustained and having to travel hours on end for appointments, we're going to be in a tough spot. So I think the state has a role to play here.
Thank you. Candidate Kelbon.
Yeah, thank you. You know, this gets back to business. The payer mix is a problem, and it's particularly a problem because of our aging population. We are one of the oldest districts in the state, and if you look at Jefferson County, it's the oldest population in the state, minus the villages in Florida. So if we have more business growth and people that are privately insured, we end up with a different payer mix. You have the higher reimbursement from private payers that offsets the Medicare and Medicaid. So that's critical. That's until we can fix things at the federal level. And there's a lot that needs to be fixed in our healthcare system at the federal level. We can certainly lobby for that. One perhaps easier piece than completely redoing the federal healthcare system, which probably needs to happen, is to lobby for a higher reimbursement rate for non-critical access hospitals, because I would argue all of our rural hospitals are critical access. So if OMC could get the same kind of reimbursement that Jefferson County or Jefferson Health does, because it's a smaller hospital, that would be a step forward. Jobs for different payer mix, lobbying the congressional level, and then also housing, because sometimes when we do find qualified people, they can't find the housing they need. That's certainly a problem in Jefferson. So we need to address the housing part. And then lastly, work with our community colleges so that we are training some of the people that are needed in healthcare that are locally rooted, so they'll stay here. Everything from medical assistants on up. I know we're never going to be graduating MDs here, but we can do a lot below that for technicians and such. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway.
We've heard a lot of people talking about the mix of payers and payees and Medicare and Medicaid, and I think everyone has just failed to realize that the federal healthcare system isn't going to do it anymore. We need to establish a state level universal healthcare system that can reimburse hospitals appropriately for all services. It shouldn't matter whether someone is being covered by private insurance or public insurance. The hospital just needs to get paid for the services that they render to the patient. With all of this being said, our rural hospitals do have unique challenges that are not present in the more population center heavy hospitals. That is primarily simply issues with transport. Getting people to and from even OMC is hard, and then getting people from OMC to somewhere like Harborview or a similar higher level of care in Seattle can present their own challenges with just how hard it is to get people from where they are to where they need to be. So we need to ensure that as we are building out our state level single payer universal healthcare system, we include in that ways to get people from here to there cheaply and efficiently and in a manner that gets them the care that they need. And that will help ensure that everyone is able to get the healthcare they need when they need it without waiting for insurance. And most importantly, without waiting for the hospital admin staff to waste half of their work time trying to appeal claim denials.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
Thank you. Yeah, Medicare and Medicaid is set by the federal government, and we're not going to see a reduction of that. Honestly, we're looking at premiums going up with this administration, which is horrible as it is. And so what can the state do? The state is limited. We're in a budget crisis right now. And so OMC is not a critical access hospital, but it's looking at possibly going to a critical access hospital. So we're talking about access is a big issue, in my opinion. Access because of reimbursement rates, because of funding, because of lack of workforce. And so definitely, how do we continue to build up our workforce locally? We work directly with Peninsula Community College. There is processes where the state can help fund reimbursement rates for nursing, reimbursement rates for dental assistants, medical assistants, dental health therapists, that we could all be able to, basically have folks go to college, work directly here, already live here. And so we're not outsourcing those locums. If we end up going to a critical access hospital, which is a real discussion right now at OMC, you're going to lose 40 beds. So that's going to require more conversation with Jefferson, more conversation with Grace Harbor, more conversation with Forks. Those could possibly be capital budget requests because somebody's going to have to look to be able to, increase their capacity to bring in more patients that OMC is not going to be able to take. I think these are all real issues that are also need to be addressed day one, because these are things that we're seeing in real time. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our next question, many rural school districts are struggling with their budgets. What should the state's top priorities be for helping these schools? And we'll start with candidate Hodgson. You have 90 seconds.
Well, we should change the formula so that we don't have so that schools in the I-5 corridor aren't receiving a disproportionate or an equal amount of money that our rural schools are. Look, we're dealing with declining enrollment here. We're dealing with decrepitated buildings, and we're constantly leaning on school bonds and levies to fill the gap that the state should be present in when we're talking about improving our education. So, I had a rough go in school myself, and I can tell you that being a father of two and going through local school systems here, we need every resource that we can to be brought to bear on our public schools. Our public schools really should be the gold standard. And I think that if we focus on making our public schools the gold standard in education and support our teachers and support our para educators and our school staff, we're going to have enrollment numbers back up. While at the same time, hopefully we can start addressing a localized formula that focuses on rural school districts to make sure that they are getting a fair and equitable amount of uh, education dollars that should be going their way. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kelbon.
Yeah, it's our paramount duty to fully fund education, and we have not done so well. It is typically very hard in rural areas that are economically depressed because they don't have the ability to support with levies and bonds to the same extent that a wealthier community would do. So we do need to reallocate the McCleary money, essentially. That's part of it, but part of it is also we need to make sure we have funding for special ed and for infrastructure capital improvements to replace aging buildings. That has to happen. That's one part of it. The other part, though, is to make sure that we are being effective with the money we're spending, because we are spending at a fairly high level per student, and we're being outperformed by states that have far fewer resources. And some of that means that we have to change our approach to focus on fundamentals. It means that instead of passing kids forward to maintain graduation rates, which started with the well-intentioned No Child Left Behind Act, we need to focus on testing people at critical points, making sure that the children are performing well on standardized tests at those points, and if they're not, holding them back, getting them the tutoring they need, and getting the coaching that the staff needs. So it's part of it is properly funding it. Part of it is make sure the funding is actually being used effectively to graduate children that are ready to go either into the trades or college. And we can do better than we do now, and we certainly need to. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway.
Funding education is one of the most important things that this state has to do. And candidate Hodgson is entirely correct that it simply costs more per student to run a rural school district than it does to cost a city school district. So any system that says any student is worth the same amount of money as any other student, whether they're in Seattle or in Forks, is simply not going to fairly and adequately fund the schools. What we need to do is ensure that our states take money from everyone in the state and give that money to every school district in accordance with the actual cost per student of running any given school. And we need to acknowledge that it costs more to fund a school in some districts than in others. We need to take that into account when allocating funding. My biggest concern with schools is just that the way that local levies work means that rich areas can afford to raise taxes that they then use to fund their education and provide an unequal ground to poorer areas who cannot fund their schools through levies in the same manner. What I would propose to resolve that particular issue is to have all school levies and all school districts go into a central pot that the state then distributes equitably among all of the school districts, rather than local levies being only used for local schools.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that's something that is easy to recognize, is that we don't have the same property-based tax to be able to pass levies and bonds that are needed to backfill funding that obviously folks on the I-5 corridor can sometimes make up for that. 504 funding is on the decrease. Independent education plans is on the increase, and we're lacking when it comes to our actual educators. And so, what I would like to explore is the Education Legacy Trust Fund. The Millionaires Estate Tax ended up cutting the Education Legacy Trust from $300 to $500 million a year for the next 10 years. That's unacceptable. we need to revisit this conversation. That pays our educators, that pays our paraeducators, that pays our staff. We also need to start exploring this millionaire's tax. Is there a way? A cookie cutter doesn't work. A cookie cutter for the whole state doesn't work. So is there a way for us to go regional and start looking at maybe stabilized funding from this millionaire's tax directly to rural schools? Now, these are all things I'm really excited about jumping right into. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
Yeah, so first of all, as candidate Kelbon already said, it is our paramount duty in Washington State's Constitution to fully fund education. And I just have to say that education has shaped my entire life. I was raised by two public school teachers, became a teacher myself. So I've been in schools in all different types of areas, and I've seen, firsthand what different types of funding can get. And so, I fully support fully funding special education, continuing investments in our career and technical education programs, advancing, expanding dual credit opportunities, strengthening school-based mental health services, all of these things that are so vital to the future generations that we are educating in our schools. The issue is that the prototypical school funding model assumes that schools of a certain size and staffing structure, require the same amounts of money. And so, they still have to do, transportation, special education, CTE, all of those types of, full range of classes with a lot fewer students and a smaller tax base, as has been mentioned. And so I really think that, as candidate DePoe said, we need to focus on different sources of revenue, such as the millionaire's tax, and more level playing field with our tax structure so that we can actually make this happen and ensure that we have good outcomes for our students in Washington State.
Thank you. Okay, from schools to housing. What is your biggest idea for making housing more affordable? This is a 90-second question. Candidate Kelbon, you have 90 seconds.
Great, thanks. There's a few things we need to do. One of them is to modify the Growth Management Act so we can have smaller lots, not just within urban growth areas, but our so-called LAMRDs, local areas of more intense rural development, our historic village centers and crossroads. So you don't have to be able to afford to buy 5 acres to build. If you could have quarter-acre, half-acre lots there, that goes a long way. Similarly, if we can allow multifamily housing in those areas, we've already gone part of that way last year with a bill that permits multifamily housing using community septic. That's a step forward in our rural areas. Now we also need to allow those smaller lots to go with it. We need to streamline permitting. There should be an ability for a trusted builder who has shown they can comply with code to essentially self-certify and get rid of some of the inspection costs. Streamline the permitting timeline. It shouldn't take, 6 months to get a permit. It should be a lot quicker than that. And in some cases it is, but it always should be. So a lot of it is just sort of more regulation. I think there's a need to re-examine the most recent energy code, which added I'm told about $30,000 to the cost of a build. Some nominal improvements come out of that with respect to efficiency, but if it keeps people out of housing, in my view, that's not the answer. So looking at codes, looking at regulation, and then I'll go back to jobs again, and that ties into education as well. Better jobs, more families, more kids, it helps out with the schools. And here, if we have better income, we can better afford housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway.
Housing is a very simple issue to fix, and it's a very simple problem that has caused it, which is that as long as housing is considered the primary vehicle of generational wealth and the primary vehicle of middle-class investment, it will never become cheap, it will never become affordable, and it will never become abundant. There are too many people in this state that rely on the value of their property continuing to increase indefinitely for it to ever be a good idea for them to put enough money into housing that it becomes cheap and affordable, because affordable housing is not expensive housing, and they cannot make their money that way. The solution to this problem is to invest in public development groups that are focused on building houses for people to live in and not on investment properties. And we can even go above and beyond groups like the Peninsula Housing Authority, and we could make a state-level housing development authority that is capitalized through the state budget and that constructs housing and sells it to people that will live there, or to tenants associations, or to housing co-ops, or to local NGOs or nonprofits that can appropriately oversee the house without saying that it is a primarily profit-driven activity. There is no place for profit in what keeps you warm, and there is no place for profit in what keeps you dry. All housing and all housing development needs to be turned into a nonprofit industry so that all of us will have somewhere to live.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
Thank you. I would say, start off working with the county commissioners on infill, and also, getting back to that permitting and siting issue, definitely finding ways to streamline permitting, streamline the siting, but also following the environmental codes that are needed. There's ways to do that, or folks shouldn't be held up. Marcia said 6 months. I've seen things held up for 18 months. That's unacceptable. Now, when I talked about job creations and building trades, that goes back to getting developers out here, of getting that levee finished that Theringer started down in Grace Harbor. That's a great example of, one, it's lowering cost of flood insurance, but two, it's making things more accessible for developers looking to come out here and develop those neighborhoods. That same thing in Jamestown, same thing in Port Townsend, same thing in Sequim. And then we look at, other projects for affordable housing. Maybe there's community trust land projects that we can work directly with the counties on for affordable housing. But that also needs to make sure that Commerce is getting fully funded that money that goes to those projects. And so diving right into siting a permanent first off, but also working with our county folks to see how we can get people in the areas that are empty right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
I mean, no disrespect here to candidate Callaway, but housing is not a simple issue to fix. Sorry. This is one of the most complex issues that we are facing. Housing is probably the issue I hear about most when I'm talking to people at the doors. So whether I'm talking to young families, seniors on fixed incomes, healthcare workers, retirees who say, I mean, I talked to somebody yesterday who was in a beautiful house. And the first thing she said was, housing. We need workforce housing. And she said, we're doing fine, but we're worried about other people. And this is somebody who doesn't even have children. And that's what she's thinking about. So we can tell that people in our communities are already feeling it, whether they're personally affected directly or not. So the value is there, and it's not a simple fix at all. My husband and I rent an ADU here because buying a home just is not realistic. Beyond that, rental prices are just completely out of reach for so many people. And that's the reality for most working families, even those with good jobs. And for people, people on fixed incomes and retirees as well. So if elected, I would work on legislation to increase housing supply. Needs to be done in ways that actually make sense for our communities, though. So, Port Townsend has less than 1% of its land that is actually buildable. So we got to be creative. Candidate DePoe mentioned infill. That's, number one thing. And I would partner with Representative Birnbaum in his legislation he's working on now to streamline the permitting process.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
Yeah, this is one of the things I'm running on. It's one of the things that is not abstract to me. I've been there and I've lived that. In fact, the house that I live in now, the one that I said that my parents were able to purchase through a first-time homeowners program through HUD, that's one that I ended up purchasing, and I remodeled and kept my mom here with me so that she could age in place because she was going to lose her house due to predatory lending in a refinance. So I bring that up because look, the easiest housing to construct to keep around is already existing housing. So we need to first and foremost make sure that we are protecting our individuals who are in homes and are able to stay in homes if it makes sense for them. But yes, we absolutely need to build denser housing and utilize our infill lots and streamline our permitting process. These are all things that, I think we're all well aware of, but they're not easy. All the easy decisions have been made. So everybody that's running right now, they're running to make the hard decisions, and that's okay. I think that's what we signed up for. But when you look at some of the issues that we face with permitting, I was past president for Clallam County Habitat for Humanity, and we would see a project increase substantially in price due to permitting. And that is from the state, county, and city level. It all adds up. They say time is money, and in a fluctuating market, by the time permitting got done, goods and services price had already risen and made it so that it was going to be more cost prohibitive.
Thank you. Moving on to the next set of questions, which are about budget. Washington faces another difficult budget. What are your top spending priorities and where would you look for savings? This is a 90-second question. Candidate Callaway, you have 90 seconds.
Solving the budget does not mean austerity. Austerity is a tool that fascists use to try and keep people from having a good time and thriving in their life. The solution to this problem is to raise taxes on the corporations and to raise taxes on the upper classes. These people run the most wealthy corporations that have ever existed in human history, and their money is barely touched by the way Washington state taxes are structured. We need a full progressive income tax. We need more than just the millionaire's tax. We need taxes that are thorough, that ensure that the upper class pay their fair share, that take these mega corporations that rely on the government to subsidize their workforce to be the ones that cover those subsidies. We spend as a state a ridiculous amount of money paying Walmart employees healthcare bills for them because those Walmart employees get paid so little they qualify for our medical care assistance. Why is Walmart not the one paying for that medical care for their employees? All of the holes in our budget can be easily filled if we simply allow these corporations to make slightly less money instead of trying to think about what we as people can give up to allow these corporations to become ever more wealthy.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
Where would I prioritize funding? I'd go right back to education and healthcare. The legislature was able to find ways to backfill Planned Parenthood in a lot of areas across the state. Unfortunately, the one in Port Angeles closed down. We need to find ways to get that place back up and running because folks that look for those services now have to go that much farther to find them. It's unfortunate. How do we pay for that? We continue to work on this tax code. We continue to, the millionaire's tax was the start of it. We go on and on about the 1% pay 4% and the working class pay 12% and it goes up to 17%. I understand that, but as the shift continues to move, the millionaires are supposed to pay more, but the working class and the poor are supposed to stay less. So we need to continue that progress. We need to continue that direction that we're headed in. And we need to continue looking at this funding and start making these earmarks and start directing this funding out. Okay, this is a cost savings that needs to go directly to our rural communities because of the unique differences that have already been stated before. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I just want to say that every budget that we pass is ultimately a statement of our priorities as a state. So as a representative, one of my most important responsibilities will be deciding how we actually invest taxpayer dollars and what the statement of our priorities are. So Washington's required to pass a balanced budget. That is what we are supposed to do. So we have to make thoughtful decisions about where our resources will go and which resources will have the greatest impact. So I believe that we should protect our core commitments to healthcare, infrastructure updates, public safety, and education. Those are our primary duties to people and the ones that make the most impact in day-to-day life. And we need to make sure that every dollar is being spent effectively. So I believe that government should regularly evaluate programs to see whether they're actually producing the results. I think sometimes in government, we get really caught up in bureaucracy and kind of the process over the outcomes. And we need to make sure that we are thinking about that and addressing that. If something's working well, we should continue investing in it. And if it's not, then we should move on from it and better redirect those resources to programs that'll better serve us. I also think it's important that we invest in the things that actually prevent more costly situations later, like housing. And thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
Housing, healthcare, public safety, infrastructure. If we can get those right in the budget, then we're doing okay. We have a good, solid platform to move on from there. Look, I mean, I think a lot of this stuff goes back to revenue, and we definitely need to change some of the ways that we do things, and we have made some progress in that. As far as our regressive tax structure, we've at least made some steps forward. with capital gains tax, millionaires tax, and with adopting a budget that is based off of actual and not a projected revenue. So yeah, look, I mean, I think if we get those things right, not only are they helping people now, but they're also preventing situations from getting worse. In each one of those areas, healthcare, housing, infrastructure, and public safety, if any of those go lax, then our society's quality of life and safety starts to suffer. So those are the ones that I would prioritize.
Thank you. Candidate Kelbon.
Yeah, this is a really important topic. And, as former Governor Christine Gregoire recently pointed out, we have a bit of a spending problem. We've more than doubled our state budget over the last 10 years, far outpacing population growth and inflation. Yet I don't feel like we're doing better at something I think we're doing worse, and what we should most be focusing on. That is what the state has to do under our Constitution and what only the state can do. Education, infrastructure, public health and safety. That should be our focus. I think we need to go back to basics. What were we spending on 10 years ago? What have we added since then? If we've added things that are wants and not needs, that aren't our core function, they probably aren't things we should be funding. That's better left to the private sector and the nonprofits that we love to support. We need to look at what we're spending and how effective that is. Again, I talked about education earlier. Are we actually getting kids educated with ability to read and write? And if not, we need to revise those programs and test more regularly. Same thing with our homeless spending. We've spent tens of millions of dollars chasing a housing first policy that has proven not to work. So we need to revise our approach there and make sure that we're actually effectively getting people long term off the streets and into productive lives. We need to also not fix this problem by trying to layer on additional taxes. The millionaire's income tax didn't reduce regressive taxes, hardly at all. We kept the state sales tax where it was. Well, we haven't reduced real estate taxes. We just layered that on, and we're chasing out businesses that I think will cost us money in the long term and short term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next question is a simple yes/no question. And I'm going to go around and ask each of you. Do you support funding emergency shelters, permanent supportive housing, tiny home villages, treatment facilities, or some combination? Candidate DePoe, yes or no? You're on mute.
Yes.
Okay. Candidate, I'm sorry, I've lost my place.
Kuehn,
Candidate Kuehn. Okay, thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
Yes, they work.
Candidate Kelbon.
That's a broad statement. Those that work, yes. Those that don't. And we need to address addiction and mental illness as well. You can't just focus on those things.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so the next group of questions focus on climate and natural resource management. I'm going to start again with a yes/no 10-second response. Do you support the Climate Commitment Act? Candidate Kuehn, yes or no?
Wow. It's the nuance. There's nuance to that. I support using the dollars for what they're intended to be used for.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson, yes or no?
I support the Climate Commitment Act.
Thank you. Candidate Kelbon, yes or no?
No, the goals were good, but the effect has not been, and we need more effective results. Right now, we just created a regressive tax, essentially.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway, yes or no?
Yes, but it requires amendments to add more to the carbon trade system.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. So the next question is again a 90-second question. What role should the state play in developing clean energy? Candidate Hodgson, you have 90 seconds.
I couldn't even write the question down, but I'm first, so I don't think I need to. Look, I think the state needs to be a leader. There's no reason other states should be a leader in geothermal and wind and solar. This is the evergreen state. This is part of our identity. And when we're dealing with an energy crisis, and especially with the possibility of battery facilities or AI data centers, things like that, which is certainly a different topic altogether. This is a space where Washington absolutely should be a lead in technology and research and development and manufacturing and in jobs. So yeah, I think that there's some exciting stuff going on. We have some really exciting stuff going on, especially in the central Washington area with alternative jet fuels, with solar and with wind and with fusion. So we've got the recipe for this stuff here. I think we just need to lean into it and look, renewables, it's called renewable for a reason. When we look at our fossil fuel industries, those are finite, and it may be a big finite, but you also have to take into account the the state of world affairs and the turbulent costs that can be associated with it there. So 100% Washington needs to be all in on renewable developments.
Thank you. Candidate Kelbon.
Yes, we do need to invest in that, and we have to also be realistic about it. I'm all for solar and wind. I have a solar-powered home. I've done 3 solar-powered builds. They're great, but we live in the Northwest, and they're not as reliable as they are elsewhere. So we need to be focusing also on small modular nuclear. That's probably our long-term answer. We need to be looking at geothermal. All of those things need to come in. We also have to help out with our grid structure, which is greatly overloaded. But we have to do this in a realistic way, and we're not there yet. So in the meantime, we need natural gas. We need to keep the technology we have and add to that. And I'm in favor of more carrots than sticks. So incentives to get people to put in solar, great. Forcing us to change before we're ready has led to a lot of increased cost. And I'm luckily not on PSE, but I'm listening to what's happening with their rates, and part of it's because they have to become carbon neutral by I think 2030. Don't quote me on the exact number, but they're being forced to invest rather quickly and rather heavily, and all the big payers are paying for it. So we have to address it smartly, and if you do so with carrots rather than sticks, people are going to adopt it naturally, and it's going to happen. If you force it too prematurely, there's just an awful lot of cost added. The Climate Commitment Act is, again, one of those things that adds to our cost of groceries and building materials and everything else we buy, and I'm not seeing the carbon reductions ahead of that. So there's a stick that needs adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. What role should the state play in developing clean energy?
So our state is, as I previously mentioned, uniquely positioned to not just target net zero carbon. We can create a negative carbon ecosystem in our state. And we need to invest in the research and the infrastructure that can get us there. Not just things like our standard solar and wind, but we need to invest in research into tidal energy and research into utilizing not just our woods as carbon capture mechanisms, but our oceans and our rivers as carbon capture mechanisms. We have all of the natural resources we need. We have the space we need. We have a state that truly believes in the mission of clean energy. And I think that we can lead not just this country, we can lead the world in the creation of a sustainable net negative carbon system that relies not just on big power plants or big solar farms, but local democratized distributed grids. We don't need giant dams blocking up important habitat rivers. We don't need a giant wind farm that uses up the entirety of what could be fields. We need a solar panel on every roof. We need wind turbines in the corners and at the interchanges. We need tidal energy off the coast. We need a lot of small power. We need a lot of distributed power, and we need a lot of different methods of production so that every single form of power makes up for the strengths and weaknesses of every other form.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
Yes, we should be a leader, and that honestly ties right back in again to funds that are used from the CCA, unallowable use. And so I think it needs to definitely be an iterative process, though. It needs to be mapped out. The grid is definitely an issue right now. We need new transmission corridors. We need reconductoring that needs to take place in order for us to be able to do this. And Sorry about that. And these are things that, fortunately, I've been able to continue to work on through the last couple of years with this legislature already, and I've seen pathways. There's ways to streamline SEPA that still takes environmental protections front and center. There's ways to work with folks and partnerships and reconductoring, whether it's nonprofits or whether it's tribes. And so, and once again, the support for the CCA funds in order to make this happen. Looking at this last session where CCA $540 million was taken out of CCA, as a loan. It's supposed to be put back this session. I don't know if that's going to be put back this session. It's going to be interesting. But what we can't have is more of that, another $540 taken out this next session that's going to hinder our ability to even continue to do these clean energy projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
First of all, I just want to start by saying that climate change is real and it's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now. As a new mom, I mean, my daughter is literally the reason that I'm running because I want to make sure that I can have some part in leaving a better world for her that her and her generation and generations beyond will inherit. And so, when I think about that, I think about the type of air, the clean air, the healthy forest, the salmon, the jobs that are available. So not just, our natural resources that we need to protect, but also the opportunities that we can be a leader in Washington State. I think Washington State has been a leader for sure in climate policy, but we also need to make sure that we are doing it in a responsible way that makes sense. I don't think that people should have to choose between a good paying job and a healthy environment. We can do both. The state should be investing in things like cleaner energy, because kind of as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, a more reliable electric grid, because we're almost at capacity here, energy efficiency, helping communities prepare for wildfires and other impacts that we're already seeing. But at the same time, so I spent this past legislative session working alongside the Pulp and Paper Workers Union. And, these family wage jobs are critical. So CCA dollars need to be spent on, those types of jobs and green jobs going forward. They need to be utilized in the right way.
Thank you. The next question is actually a 30-second short answer question. Do you support data centers in District 24? Why or why not? Candidate Kelbon, you have 30 seconds.
Boy, that's a good one. And until this morning, because I do read and I changed my views, I would have said no. I look at the impact on climate. It generates a lot of heat, water usage, vibration, not a lot of jobs. But I did read an article this morning about the benefits in Quincy. I think if they're done right, there could be some possibility that this could work well. I would just want to study it really carefully to make sure the negatives don't outweigh the positives.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway.
All data centers should be banned, not just in LD24, but in the entire world.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
Thanks. Again, I've been also looked at the data centers in Quincy, and I see how they have recirculated water. I've seen how they put in environmental protections. But for me, I can't say whether I would say you have to do this or you don't have to do this. I'd want to work directly with the counties and weigh out the pros and the cons. And if the county doesn't want it and the people don't want it, then that speaks for itself in that area. But those are questions that need to be asked and had before you start moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologize for jumping in. Candidate Kuehn.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo exactly what candidate DePoe said, that I think this is not something that we should make sure that we are partnering with local folks, local elected officials, and looking at the data. From what I've seen so far, it's really bad for the people and the environment. So I'm hoping that we can, have really good, strict restrictions in place and listen to the people. What do the people want?
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
No, not really. I don't see how that in data centers in their current form can guarantee a neutral impact on the environment. Not only that, the water consumption they use, not all of which is recyclable, and the draw on the grid. We're at the end of the line on the grid as it is. To put a data center out here, I don't know, makes sense for one, but also what is that going to do to the draw on the grid and to our to the rates that we're paying? So I would know on that.
Thank you. The next question focuses on immigration. How do you think the federal government is handling immigration? Based on what you think, what role should Washington State play? Candidate Callaway, you have 90 seconds.
As I mentioned in my intro, I am a member of several of our local rapid response teams for ICE. As you can imagine, I do not appreciate their interference in our environment. I am a strong believer that immigration is what makes a society great. I believe that having people from other cultures come in and enjoy the privileges of being in this country and having the opportunity to contribute to our society and to our economy and to our local culture is always going to be useful. If people want to come here, they can come here. If people want to leave, they can leave. There is never a reason to deny someone entry to a country just because they came from a country that you don't like, or just because the color of their skin is kind of weird and you don't like it, or just because you don't like whatever accent they speak with. People are people, and it doesn't matter where you live, and it doesn't matter where you were born. Everyone who wants to live somewhere should be able to live there.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
How's the federal government dealing with immigration? Horrible. It's a terrible situation. People from, my community are getting picked up. Native Americans. It's unacceptable. It's terrible. And so, I think they're doing a horrible job. That's the simple part of it. What can the state do? I like the fact that they made, ban masks on ICE agents in Washington State. There's other things that we can do. For example, transit drivers are immigrants were basically had their CDL taken away from them. But we could certify those CDLs locally, and those are a lack of jobs to immigrants as actually taking away funding for somebody to provide for their family. That's just one small thing that we can do. But continuing to move down the path that we've been going to be able to push back however we can. Immigration is amazing. It's beautiful. We need all these people here in our country. It's what makes this country so amazing. And yeah, once again, and then with the federal government's doing a terrible job at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
Will you repeat the question, please? Make sure I have it right.
Yes, absolutely. How do you think the federal government is handling immigration? And based on what you think, what role should Washington State play?
Yeah. So first of all, how is the federal government handling immigration? It just horribly. We needed immigration reform many years ago. I would love to see a much more streamlined process and to I mean, this is just the age-old authoritarian tactic, right? Of finding a common enemy or creating a common enemy in the immigrant. And it's so sad as a former history teacher, seeing how many people are susceptible to that type of propaganda. It's disgusting and horrifying. We need comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level. But, that being said, it is a federal responsibility. So, states have an important role in protecting constitutional rights and making sure that our communities are safe. I'm thankful that we live in Washington, which is a sanctuary state, because it's not local law enforcement's job or should be their job at all to be focusing on that type of work. And we should be protecting people from being just absolutely, mistreated and disappeared from the streets. I support the Washington's Keep Washington Working Act, because I believe local law enforcement should be focused on preventing crime and keeping our community safe and not serving as federal immigration officers. When people trust local law enforcement, they're actually more likely to report crimes and cooperate with investigators and actually help solve crimes and have that as their focus rather than, supporting terrible policies at the federal level.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
Poor F minus. If I could give worse, I would. But look, next week it might be worse. And it's true because, look, I'm 47 years old, 40 some odd years ago. My mom, who we shared the same skin tone, she was driving with my dad in San Diego. My dad's blonde haired, blue eyed. They pulled my mom and my dad over and they asked, guess who? My mom, for her green card. And my mom had no idea what they were asking for. She was born in Michigan. So she pulled out the only green card she had, her United States Marine Corps active duty ID card. Right. And like, because she had no idea that she was being targeted just for the color of her skin. And, you know, 40 some odd years later, we have veterans that are still having issues and being challenged on their citizenship. And by the way, I just took a short little getaway with my girlfriend and my daughter, who shares my skin tone, asked me, Dad, is there ice here? I mean, imagine that. 14 years old. Dad, is there ice here? That is crazy. That is insane. This is America, a country of immigrants. Our strength is our diversity. Our strength is in our diversity. And I'm sorry because the first time I said that to a group was at Port Angeles High School on the same day that our Secretary of Defense said that it was our weakness. So poor, bad. I support Keep Washington Working, and I'm so glad that we have a law that prevents officers from covering their faces. That's counter to the whole idea of accountable law enforcement officers.
Thank you. Candidate Kelbon.
I'm going to give it a mixed. There's one part I do like, which is we did need to get control of our border. We are being flooded with fentanyl, and it's causing a lot of misery throughout the state and the peninsula. That's horrible. I also think we need to get a hand on trafficking of both minor and adults. So that part I like. The other part, not so crazy about. I would like to see us working as a country on paths to citizenships for productive individuals, and we need them. I'm a granddaughter of immigrants, and I see the need in our technology sectors. I see the need in our home building sectors. I see that in agriculture. So people that are here and lawfully living their lives, we should be embracing and trying to get them, whether it's green card or citizenship, that pathway. So I don't agree with the tactic of like trying to chase everybody out or closing the borders. We need to control who's coming in to make sure they are productive and not damaging us. We can't have the cartel infiltrating like it has been even down in Port Orchard, for instance. So in that way, it's a mixed score in my mind. What should the state do? This is primarily a federal issue. I'm a rule follower. If we don't like the laws, we have to change them, and we have to elect people that put laws in place that we like. So yeah, there are things we can do here at the state level. We can enforce constitutional rights. Those do apply to immigrants. You don't have to be a citizen for constitutional rights. That's the law. But I don't like to see us interfering with federal officers that are trying to, arrest violent criminals. In some cases, that is the case. So those we need to let them do their job. Thank you.
Thank you. The next group of questions focus on government elections and structures, and there's a series of yes/no answers first. The first question is, would you support state efforts to limit the influence of the Citizens United decision on Washington elections? Yes or no, candidate DePoe?
Yes.
Candidate Kuehn, yes or no?
Easy yes.
Candidate Hodgson, yes or no?
Yes, 100%.
Candidate Kelbon, yes or no?
I would support blocking corporations, unions, PACs, all sorts of influence on our elections.
Candidate Callaway, yes or no?
We don't just need to block corporations from interfering in elections. We need to block all private money. Elections should be entirely publicly funded.
Thank you. Also a yes/no question. Do you believe in the separation of church and state? Candidate Hodgson, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Candidate Kelbon, yes or no?
That's an easy yes. Thank you.
Candidate Callaway, yes or no?
Yes.
Candidate DePoe, yes or no?
Yes.
Candidate Kuehn, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm grateful to be endorsed by the Center for Free Thought Equality.
Thank you. And I think I went in a little bit reverse order, so I'm going to go back a question. Should Washington allow state and local governments to use ranked choice voting? Candidate Kuehn, yes or no?
I'd like to explore that, yes.
Candidate Hodgson, yes or no?
I think it can be done. It's going to be a huge undertaking, educating the voters, and I'd like to see that play out in municipalities first. It's possible.
Candidate Kelbon, yes or no?
I'm open to learning more about it, for what I see right now, no, I wouldn't support it.
Candidate Callaway, yes or no?
While ranked choice voting is a good start, there are significantly better systems.
Candidate DePoe, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. The next question is a 90-second question. How should the state balance tribal sovereignty with local government concerns of land use, taxation, and public services? Candidate Kelbon, you have 90 seconds.
Jake Nasatega was my first year basic legal skills partner, and he wrote the Constitution for the Milwaukee Band in Minnesota. And I completely understand and accept and endorse the fact that our tribal nations are sovereign nations. We have to respect that for sure. I'm very admirable of the economic development that several of our tribes have done. Jamestown Skellum in particular has done tremendous work in the county in economic development. I love that. I'd like to see what the McCaw's doing with their hemlock and cross-laminated timber. That's all great. I do have some concerns. One of them is that if there is tribal land put into trust and it's taken off the tax rolls, if that if there are still services being provided in the way of EMS and fire or police, that needs to be made whole in some fashion, whether that's a payment in lieu of taxes or PILT, or whether that's other services that are provided instead. I want to make sure that that happens. With respect to the tribes requiring land, I'm all for that. I do have some concerns with the proposal for the Dungeness Spit and Protection Island transfers, given that those are national wildlife refuges, and there is a proposal to have commercial aquaculture going on either in or adjacent to the refuge. And if that's how that's going, that's not a good step forward, I think, for wildlife refuges. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway.
What the tribes do on their own land is their business. As was just mentioned, tribes are sovereign nations. They do what they want to do on their land, and it is not our business to tell them what to do. I would like to see two things happen. I would like to see an opportunity for county or city government to be able to send an advisory non-voting member to tribal councils that are managing land inside their administrative borders. And I would like to especially see tribal members being invited onto every committee or commission that has a potential of affecting that tribe's lands.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe.
Could you repeat the question? I just want to make sure that I get it correctly. Seemed like there was a couple of nuances there.
Yes, absolutely. How should the state balance tribal sovereignty with local government concerns of land use, taxation, and public services?
It's sovereignty, and how should the state balance that? Well, the state needs to recognize the Constitution. The state needs to recognize treaties. The state needs to recognize the federal government on trust lands. The state needs to recognize, so when you say balance, I guess it's build a relationship with the tribe if they want to balance and work with them on understanding what tribes do on their own land. It's not a request or it's not an ask, or it's not a favor that the state lets tribes do what they want on their own land. It's their land. They get to do what they want on their own land. So the state doesn't really get to make a decision on whether they should or shouldn't be doing something with their own land. Now, I think that there's ways to strengthen that. There's ways to strengthen that through the government-to-government relationship, with the Centennial Accord, with the nonprofit that I'm running right now, working with the legislators. There's ways to strengthen that in permitting. There's ways to strengthen that in siting. There's ways to strengthen that in inclusion. And so, and when it comes to management of land, especially when we're talking about wildlife refuges, I look at situations where who would I rather have managing that land? The people that have been stewarding that land since time immemorial, or this federal administration? And that's a simple answer for me. And so, yeah, I would say that, the state needs to continue to build relationships with tribes, partnerships, and you get things like healthcare, you get things like, economic development, and you get things like been seen in county after county across the state when those relationships are strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that our tribal partners have been incredibly important in the 24th legislative district. I mean, we see what has been done with these healing clinics, and it's been, fantastic. I got a chance to go down in the Quinault Nation to be able to see what they're doing and kind of hear about that. And I'm hoping to go to the Jamestown one pretty soon here. But as far as, how we can, as local governments looking at, land use and whatnot, I think this really this is not like an either or answer, and it's certainly not an easy, quick 60-second answer. This is all about relationships that we can continue to lean on. This is about respect. It's about operating, particularly as a legislator from this district, with humility and asking questions and being willing to maintain government to government consultation here. So to me, that means, making sure that I listen early, honor treaty rights 100%, and recognize that tribes bring generations of knowledge and experience and expertise to the table. And so, that's how I would go about working with those partners, because they've been incredible partners. So thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
A legislator has a huge role here because they can lay the foundation for the conversation. And look, first and foremost, our tribes are sovereign nations. And so what we should do first is follow the Constitution and follow treaties. But look, something that's really important that a legislator can do is serve as the educational funnel, as the government representative to our tribal partners, and make sure and maintain those relationships, not just at the state level, but also working through local elected officials to make sure that partners are brought to the table and everybody's concerns are addressed. And we've seen a good example of that in Forks. There was some concern with trust land there, and the city of Forks was able to work with their tribal partners and come to a good resolution that was good for the tribe, good for the community. And I think that that's just how it works, on nation to nation relationships. Look, our tribes are unique to our area. They are our brothers and sisters. They're also sovereign nations in and of themselves, and they're integral to our state's identity. And we love and cherish our tribes, and I just think that we need to come to the table with that type of attitude and willingness to listen.
Thank you. Given the time, I think we have the time for an extra 30-second short answer question. What's one book or person that has shaped how you lead? Candidate Callaway, you have 30 seconds.
I have a lot of options to say here. I'll just go with the both amusing and funny one. I'm just going to say The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe, you have 30 seconds.
That's a tough question, because there's so many that shape who you are and your beliefs and your principles. So I'd go back to Uncle Bruce Wilkie, who was instrumental in certain litigation that took place in Washington here, instrumental in some civil rights successes here in Washington. And yeah.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
It's a hard one. I would have to say my mom. I really respect how she thinks about the world, and I think that all politics are local. They start in the home. They start in, your dinner table, at the dinner table, and in the conversations with people. And I just, she's been kind of a guiding light for me, and I hope to be that for my daughter. And I think that that's what we should strive to do is start right at our dinner tables and then go out from there.
Candidate Hodgson.
For a book, Give Us the Ballot. Please read. Awesome book. And for a person, for extra credit, I'll give two. So the book and the person. My mom. She's the strongest person I know. She's a former Marine. So she's just physically one of the strongest women I know anyway. But she's also one of the kindest people and toughest and most patient. And, no joke, she's the one who taught me what being a Democrat means.
Candidate Kelbon.
I'm going to go for a subscription over a book. The one that I really enjoy is The Economist. Our society is so polarized, so biased in its media, and I never know quite what to trust. You'll hear the same situation that is described polar opposites in different media. The Economist has a good neutral world and national news coverage, and I really enjoy that. For a person, I'm going to go for my dad. He was honest to a fault and always taught me to do the right thing. And he was a mechanic who couldn't sell a car because he had to point everything possibly wrong with it. That honesty I strive to meet. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. This concludes our questions segment. Candidates, it's now time for your closing statements, which will be in the opposite order of your opening statements. Candidate Kelbon, you have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you again for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate the conversation and the interest. We have some choices to make here. My thought is that we're not necessarily on the right track in the state. Things are very difficult budget-wise at the state level, at the county level, and at the municipal level. And part of that is because we have built an economy here based on grants, and we're seeing grants are not reliable. As a legislature, I'm going to fight for every grant we can get, of course, but I don't want to rely on that. We really need to have a strong economic base, and that starts with an environment that welcomes businesses, that encourages businesses, and incents them. And for that, we can get living wages that help out individually. It helps out with one half of the housing equation, the other half being regulation. It helps out with our schools. It helps out with our hospitals. So my focus is to bring my technical, it's kind of a weird combination, technical, legal, and business skills to bear to support our business growth and address some of those problems. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you'll consider setting aside party politics. I'm trying to avoid all of that and just focusing on what's right, what can we do here, and cater to the 70% of us that I think are tired of the extremes on either end. So I would appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Candidate Hodgson.
Yeah, look, thanks so much for this opportunity. This is just a great opportunity to discuss all the issues and to introduce myself to everybody and just, have a conversation. I'm running to bring rural priorities to Olympia, and those rural priorities are not abstract to me. They're ones that I grew up with, whether that was having a family wage job, whether it was housing insecurity, or even public safety issues going back to a time when I was growing up when we wanted to make sure that there is fair and equal treatment of individuals under the law. And, I think it's especially important right now in the political environment that we're in and the federal administration that we're in for people that have taken the oath to support and defend the Constitution as a service member, as a law enforcement officer, to stand up and say, these things are wrong that are going on, and I'm going to stand here in the way and represent my community and stand for diversity, for equity, for inclusion. And we're going to fight for living wage jobs here in the community. And, look, you talk about kitchen table politics. You got to have a kitchen table, for one, to sit around a kitchen table and talk about politics. And a lot of people don't right now. Some people are, I've had family members live with me, several families live with me because of the housing insecurity that they had. And this is just an extension of service. When I returned from serving my country, I started serving in my community as a law enforcement officer and then as a board member for various nonprofits. And really, I just want to continue that service and do what's right for our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Kuehn.
So first of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting and to everyone who tuned in tonight. I want to thank my fellow candidates for the conversation. I thought this was great. This election is really about who you trust to show up, to listen, to work hard, and to have an open mind for our communities every single day. I have spent my career serving others as an educator, working in the state legislature, the only candidate who can say that, and advocating for working people. I am running because I know how much potential our communities have, and I want to be a part of the efforts to build a future here where young families, seniors, workers, and small businesses can all thrive here in the 24th LD. I don't believe that public service is about titles. It's about actually delivering results for people, being accessible, listening, never losing sight of the people that you represent. So if you're looking for someone who will work tirelessly to make life more affordable, strengthen our schools, protect our natural resources, fight climate change, and ensure our rural communities have another strong voice in Olympia, I would be honored to earn your vote. I would also say being young has major advantages. So I'm 28. I've got energy and time and motivation to make this happen. I would also say, I'm going to say this. With all due respect, Marcia, you were given $111,000 by the Senate Republicans last time in the last election. So if I'm there fighting you in the general, then we've got a lot to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate DePoe?
Thank you. I really think about this election from a standpoint of what we just witnessed these last couple of days, and thinking about Theringer representing our district for 16 years. Did an amazing job, and looking at the work that he's done, I feel blessed that I was able to work alongside of him for the last decade. Him and our other representatives and senators from our area. I say that I have more union support, more tribal support, more legislative support. Even our congresswoman and our attorney general endorsed me, not to toot my own whistle, but to really emphasize that the legislature is not a one-person game. The legislature, it takes the trust of your colleagues if you really want to hit the ground running. We can all say that, we want to fund our education, that we want to fund our healthcare, that we need our infrastructure, for our roads and our jobs and our enterprises. But in order to do that, you have to know what the committees do. I'm blessed that, I've been able to do that, work with these folks directly one-on-one for quite some time now. And, I believe that I have not just the experience, but the relationships to really hit the ground running. I don't want to just win this election and be there as a representative. I want to be a fighter for our district. I think our district needs a fighter. Our district needs somebody that can really explain the narrative of the differences that our rural communities deal with on a day-to-day basis. And with your support, I just want to be that person. Thank you for your time, and thank you for everybody for showing up tonight.
Thank you. Candidate Callaway?
Patrick is entirely correct that this isn't just a one-person show. This is something that requires coordination. This is something that requires collaboration. I've been working with our local DSA chapters system called the Socialist in Office Committee. And in that committee, we don't just work in the legislature. We don't just work next to the legislature. We work alongside our electeds that actively work in the legislature. We come with a coalition of people. We come with experience in not just what is happening in the legislature, but how to move bills through it, how to get things from an idea in your head into a complete thing. We know what the current leadership in our state house has accomplished. We know, more importantly, what they haven't accomplished. We don't have universal health care. We don't have universal housing. We don't have what we need to thrive as working class members of society. The establishment Democrats have been in control of our legislature for decades now, and they've made no progress on any of these issues. It is time for a change in leadership. It is time to shift away from these failed neoliberal policies, and it is time to shift towards principled, progressive, and socialist leadership that puts the needs of the working class first, rather than the desires of the richest corporations in human history. Together we're strong, and together we can make a better Washington a reality.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening to tonight's discussion. Thank you, candidates, for your thoughtful answers and for staying on time with all of your responses. Thank you also to KPTZ, the North Olympic Library System, and Jefferson League of Women Voters for partnering with us on this forum. The candidates have taken the bold act of running. Now it's our turn to exercise our civic responsibility and vote no later than Tuesday, August 4th. Ballots will be mailed July 15th. Everyone's participation is essential for a healthy democracy. If you're not sure about your voter registration status, you can check it on the votewa.gov website. This forum has been recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted on both the League of Women Voters Clallam County website and Facebook page in a few days. Once we have it posted, be sure to spread the word among your friends who are unable to join us live so that everyone can be an informed voter. Thank you again to our candidates for participating in tonight's forum. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.